Good morning. I'd like to call the Budget and Public Employees Committee hearing to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Boyd,
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderman Aldrich, Chair Spencer,
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderman Aldrich. We have three present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, members of the public. I want to thank you all for being here today. This morning, we are conducting an official Board of Aldermen Committee hearing for the Budget and Public Employees Committee. We will be hearing just one matter, our city's budget. Just a little history and a little background here. The city's budget is handed to the Board of Aldermen by the Board of E&A, the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. They approved the budget before us, and the Board of Aldermen is deliberating aspects of the budget. We have authority and required to approve the budget, and our authority includes the ability to cut items of the budget. But at this time, according to our city's charter, the Board of Aldermen does not have the authority to add items of the budget to various departments. However, we do have a voice, we do use it, and we do advocate for things that are missing in the budget that we feel and members of the public feel need to be advocated for. So your input here is very important. It is the one part of the budget process where the public does get to engage, does get to weigh in, and does get to testify in an official capacity at these public hearings. Thank you for taking time out of your Saturday to be here and to participate in the budget. If you haven't already signed up, our clerk is taking names. If you'd like to testify, we do encourage you to. We're giving just 3 minutes. That's how we conduct our hearings in a general sense. But if there are items that are things you would like the Budget Committee or the Board of Aldermen or the Board of E&A to know about, your feelings on, and you're unable to speak to them this morning, please feel free to email myself, the clerk, and we will distribute your thoughts and your perspectives to the rest of the committee. We have our budget director, Mr. Paul Payne, with us this morning to give a brief overview of the budget in general. We also have presentations, if you haven't already picked one up in the hallway, to kind of give you an overview of our city's budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Payne to kick off our budget overview.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, and welcome everyone. My name is, again, as the chair indicated, my name is Paul Payne. I'm the city's budget director, and I work for the city's Board of Estimate and Apportionment, whose responsibility is at this time of year to recommend a budget for the fiscal year, which begins July 1st and runs through June 30th. As the chair indicated, we're in that process now. One of our requirements is that we have a balanced budget by the beginning of the fiscal year, which is July 1st. And so that's where we are in this process, actually in the final weeks of that process. So without belaboring this too long, I do have a presentation and I would like to go through it, and I'll be brief and then be available for questions afterwards. So the total proposed budget for fiscal 2025 is $1.33 billion, and that's comprised of a number of fund categories. The general fund at $580.9 million is the largest fund. It's the one that provides the funds for most of our operating services. And it's at $580.9 million, which is a 2.5% increase. And while that's an increase, it's about a decline from the revised revenue estimate of 0.8%. So while we're outperforming this year, it does hold costs down for next year relatively flat. In the special revenue categories, this includes things like the use tax fund and other special sales tax funds at $255.2 million. That's up 9.2%. You're going to see, and we'll discuss a little bit, increases in areas such as the use tax fund, which has risen within the last fiscal year. Grant funds of $61.9 million are down 23%. That's primarily due to a $12.5 million decrease in the Department of Human Services, which had an emergency housing grant last year that was not recurring. Debt service fund at 14.9 is 16.1 million. That's 14.9%. Actually, in your hard copy, it will be slightly different because your hard copy was a version that was presented to the Board of E&A back in April. This is the one presented in May. There was a change at ENA on that debt service fund. And that's, so that total you'll see is a little different than the hard copy presentation you have in front of you. On the capital improvement funds, it's 81.1 million. That's a 92% increase. One of the things you should note about the capital improvement funds, and I'll discuss that briefly, is that it incorporates 1/2 of the prior year surplus. Last year, we had a surplus of 24, of 37, 1/2 was $37 million. The prior year it was 24, and we actually budgeted that as a separate appropriation. This year, we rolled it all into the regular budget, and so that's why you see that increase there. But that incorporates a lot of capital improvements, which we'll discuss shortly. Enterprise funds consisting of the Water Division and Airport total $308.1 million. That's up 7.7%. And the internal service funds are mostly charges within departments. It's not outside funds or such like that. There was an accounting change in that. You see a decline of 69.9%. That was mostly an employee benefits fund, which is categorized as a liability. I mean, there's an accounting reason for this, but we're not reappropriating those funds in the coming fiscal year. The next couple of slides detail how we're doing on some of our key revenue sources. First one being the earnings tax through the fiscal third quarter is up 5.9%, which is a little over what we historically done, which is about 3.8%. Some of these rates you'll see are up by inflation boosting receipts there. Withholding was up 5.7%, and corporate yields were up 7.5%. The earnings tax is the largest source of revenue we have to the general fund. And you've heard a lot about that, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, about what are the risks going forward with both the earnings and the payroll tax that you see below. Payroll tax was up 1.6% through the fiscal third quarter. It grows, it's a different base. It's not, it does not include government agencies and not-for-profits. It's a 0.5% of payroll, whereas the earnings tax is 1%. Another major revenue source, the sales tax, was barely up, 0.6% through the fiscal third quarter. It is usually the first one you see showing any signs of a slowdown. So revenues are up this year, but they are a little bit slower than they were in the previous fiscal year. Now, I mentioned the local use tax, which is a special revenue fund source. It was up 27.7%. That is something we think reflects the expansion of use tax payments from those third parties online sellers. The use tax is the equivalent of a sales tax paid by vendors that sell their goods online. So Amazon had been paying that for a number of years, but there were other purveyors on the internet and online that had not. And the state of Missouri incorporated those in the last couple of years. This will be a full year we've had since that happened a year ago in January. So we do not anticipate this to be, that amount of growth to be continue. We expect that to be at plateauing pretty quickly next year. And so that would not anticipate it to be increased. And finally, restaurant and hotel taxes is reflective of our reliance or the contribution that tourism has in our city. Gross receipts tax on restaurants, that was up 4.6%, was still a good healthy number. So we haven't seen a decline there as much. And the hotel tax was up 2.4% through the third quarter. This next slide gives you an indication of where we are the current fiscal year. We are exceeding estimates, as you can see on the general fund and the local use tax fund. There were a couple on that are slightly under on the sales tax, special sales tax funds through the third quarter. But the thing I should point out on this chart is you'll see in FY25, due to some of the challenges we're going to be having and contingency reductions that we're going to be having for next fiscal year, we're not anticipating that much growth or actually a slight reduction in FY25. Okay, this slide 7, it illustrates what we look at when we try to establish what the budget and what our spending limits will be going forward. And we start with the current fiscal year, which was at $566.9 million. And as I mentioned, revenues were tracking higher than that through the third quarter. And that's an $18.6 million. There was also some one-time TIF adjustments that reduced our revenue this year, which would not repeat. So that's an increase. And then we also had the imposition of the marijuana sales tax. I can tell you that that estimate is at $2.4 million. It's a very new tax. We've only had it for 3 months receipts. Actually, right now, it's trailing that amount. You need to hit about 200,000 a month to meet 2.4 million. The last month we had was 130 some odd thousand. The Department of Revenue advises that in the first few months, it may be slower than until it gets to a point of maturity, but that's something we're gonna have to keep an eye on. And then we have normal base growth revenue, and I've got this estimated at 2.1% for next year at $12.7 million. So those all add to our revenue base. And now, going into the earnings and payroll tax issue, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about, because of the threat to some of the taxation imposed on those commuters who, those people who commute to the city and pay the earnings tax and the potential for refunds, there was an estimate that we were going to be losing some revenues, and based on that, I took a reduction of $25.9 million. That's roughly about $20 million out of earnings tax and $5 million plus out of the payroll tax, simply to accommodate as a contingency that happening. And as we found since we've introduced the budget, we have seen that court case come to that point where we are potentially going to be losing revenue. So this actually positions the budget to accommodate that. Now, I should say that we don't know eventually what that number is going to be. This is just to put us in a place where we can at least address that and have a plan in place to address a potential loss. Okay, below that, you have the various increases. This is what this does is it goes through the various departments of city government, identifying what the increases and decreases are. And I'll go through these briefly. In the area of general government, Board of Aldermen, they had a net reduction of 3 positions. That was $300,000. And they also had some one-time communication project funds. Personnel costs were up $400,000. The big increase here on ITSA. ITSA is our Information Technology Services Agency. We have recently, in the last couple of years, converted to a new accounting and payroll system, and there are continued costs associated with managing that service. In the area of finance, Comptroller's Office is adding positions both on the accounting side as well as the auditing side, and their budget's up another $1.9 million. In non-departmental area, that's basically, that is not, those are costs that are not department specific. The big item there is that we had $1 million annually allocated to the Dome as part of our joint financing agreement with the state and county, and on the financing of that facility. That was our last year. This past year was done. So now going forward, we no longer have that payment. In Department of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, most of that $2.4 million is related to pay adjustments in the parks and forestry divisions. And you see those increases accordingly. Judicial offices, we've seen some increases related to both the juvenile division, which is seeing increasing referrals related to the raise the age legislation raising on juveniles who were 17. So they've been seeing, that was an increase in the last few years that resulted in them receiving some more referrals on juveniles. We've also received revenue from the state and offsetting some of those costs. The county offices, the biggest change there you're going to see in the election board. Obviously, it's an election year this coming year where there's going to be 4 scheduled elections. That's an increase of $900,000. Let's see, on the street directors and street departments budget, you can see some increases there and decreases there. One of the larger decreases we've noticed is in the street division, is that because of the modest or mild winter we had last year, they don't need to purchase salt. They usually stockpile that and they make estimates of what they're going to need, and based on their accumulated stockpile, for the longest time they have not needed that salt. So now they're not going to be purchasing that next year. In the refuse division, there was a decline. This is actually an increase in the tonnage fee, but the actual number of tons was not as high as it was estimated, so that was tracking under. But there were, similar to parks and forestry, there were a number of salary adjustments within the street and refuse divisions, and that's why you see those increases in streets at 1.7 and refuse division $1.3 million. In the police department, police pension, The police department has experienced some attrition, as it's been highlighted, and so some reduction in their salary total cost, but their overtime cost has continued to rise, and they've got an increase in some computer and contractual services. I should point out that this is the general fund budget. Overall, the police department's about flat, if you consider all other funds, and we can talk about those in a minute. On the fire department and fire pension, the fire department's increase is about $3 million in the salary, simply because there had been a special fund called the GEMT, that's the Ground Emergency Management Transport System. That was a program reimbursing the city for transports on EMS. They have been doing less of that because their staffing has not been to that level. And so the reimbursement that we receive is also down. So that remains that we have to increase on the salary, on the general fund side, to offset that reduction. And other public safety, I'm going to hit those highlights. Office of Violence Prevention, it's a $2.6 million budget. You'll see that because of that, its total budget is going to be $7.5 million, but the whole office has been moved to what is called the use tax fund. And so we're going to talk about that in a second. So that is not a decrease, that's just moving it to a special fund. City Justice Center, that's the one area where we actually reduced positions significantly. They had over 100 positions vacant in correctional officers. Just based on history, we reduced those. They had been significantly underspending in their salaries, and so we reduced that by over 65 positions. The Board of Public Service, which is our engineering department and maintains city facilities, sees some various increases, particularly with facilities management. Your utility costs, just like anyone else, the city has to pay its electric bill and its gas bill and its sewer bill, and that's where all that is contained. And so when we have increases in salary and in utilities, that's where you see those costs. Similarly, the ESD, which is the Equipment Services Division of the Department of Board of Public Service, they are charged with maintaining the city's fleet of vehicles. So when something breaks down, it goes to ESD and they fix it. And they do that as a mix of both in-house staff as well as contractual repairs, and some of those costs have also increased. So anyway, you take all these increases and decreases and you end up with about a $14.1 million increase, and that produces the $580.9 million budget and balancing against the revenue projection. In terms of general revenue in detail, you can see, as I mentioned, the earnings tax being the largest portion, that's estimated at $210.6 million. That's a decline of 5.2%. And again, that accommodates that contingency reduction I mentioned, that in both that and as well as the payroll tax, which is at $40.4 million, you see an 8.1% reduction. So that's an estimated reduction in the individual portion of that tax, which resulted in that those reduced numbers. Property tax estimated increase at 1.7% at $81.4 million. I've highlighted even though the sales tax is 62.4, that's a 2.8% increase. That reflects mostly the TIF adjustments that were in this year rather than growth. Growth is usually around 1% or less, and that's what this anticipates. So that's an anomaly of sorts of that 2.8. Marijuana sales tax estimated at $2.4 million. Various intergovernmental receipts, which are payments from the state that we get, such as the gas tax and things like that. Departmental fees and fines, those are payments for, let's say, the building division inspection fees or city court fines or any park recreation fees, those type of things. That is in that category, and it's up to 3.8%. And I won't, this next slide just breaks down the allocations according to category of department. Again, I won't go through these in too detail. Just what it's illustrating is the budget itself is up by 2.5%, with some of those increases scattered across. You've got slight decreases in some departments, and the larger increases as discussed earlier, such with the election board, the comptroller's office, and parks department. These next couple of slides, I want to address over and above the general fund. As I mentioned, we have some special funds, and special funds are certain tax revenues that are allocated for specific purposes. These can be either allocated because of the state authorizes these taxes for specific purposes, and then the city itself passes ordinances which can allocate them by a particular purpose as well. And one of our largest ones has been the local use tax. It has been growing since inception back in 2001. Estimated receipts for this fiscal year is $61.8 million. Now that's, as I mentioned, that's overperforming this year. And so when putting together the budget, we allocated not only the estimated receipts, but also the excess that we were anticipating in the current fiscal year. And I'll just point out the highlights there. There are a number of various departments that get funds from there. First of all, on a formula basis, the Affordable Housing Commission gets, by ordinance, $5 million. We've been allocating $6.5 million in the last few years, and it will receive that. The Healthcare Trust Fund for healthcare purposes is $5 million, and then building demolition is always allocated $3 million. Now, those other departments' allocations are what's called the Excess Use Tax Trust Fund, and is a little bit more flexible in terms of their allocations. The ones I've highlighted are the ones that major changes. As I mentioned, the Office of Violence Prevention, funded in its entirety in the use tax fund now, is at $7.5 million. Police Department, police pension at $26.6 million. That's a $4 million increase. And the Health Department, which includes an inmate health care at $13.7 million. That inmate health care allocation to the Health Department is a new item. It was established this fiscal year. And again, that is being funded through the use tax receipts. There are a couple of one-time projects here in the local use tax fund. CDA is being allocated $2.2 million for the development of modular homes, as well as a pharmacy desert initiative. And the Board of Public Service has another $2 million, $1 million for the animal shelter and $1 million for Soulard market improvements, which will be supplemental to what we have allocated in the capital fund. The economic development sales tax is another one of those taxes which under the state has authorized, and the ordinance allocates according to formula. 60% of those receipts go to the transit, which is the dedicated to the expansion of Metrolink, and that has been allocated each year. It's estimated at $14.3 million next year. It's estimated that at the end of the current fiscal year, there will be $81.9 million accumulated in that fund for that purpose. 10% goes to the neighborhood stabilization efforts of PDA and CDA as listed there. Another 10% goes to the workforce development portion, which is managed by Slate, as well as the Director of Human Services. And then 10% also goes to public safety infrastructure, which is, Comptroller has a portion of supporting the 911 calling system. That's more of a system rather than the personnel. SEMA has a mass notification program, and then BPS, that PSAP is something that we've been contributing to a number of years. That's the public safety answering point. That's a major capital improvement that we've been contributing funds for, and that's to address a consolidation of the 911 system over by the fire department headquarters on Jefferson. City infrastructure, it also gets 10%. That's 10% that's allocated to the capital fund, and you'll see in a slide later that amount that's in the capital fund. So that's the economic development sales tax fund. There was also a separate sales tax allocated specifically to public safety, which was known as Prop P. And Prop P was an increase of a half-cent sales tax specifically allocated to the police, fire, and the circuit attorney by those percentages you see there. 66% to the police department, 28% fire, and 6% to the circuit attorney. Now, in addition to that, when you raise the sales tax, well, the use tax, which by statute tracks the sales tax, also goes up. And so when that Prop P tax passed, there was an allocation to the use tax portion that you see on the second half of that table, and 25% of those receipts, and that's, so you've got 24.2 million in the sales tax, 7.2 million in the use tax. Now, 25% of the 7.2 was allocated to after-school programs. 7.7% is allocated to the circuit attorney, so that office gets a proportion of both parts of the Prop P sales and use tax. 25% is allocated to the recreation programs. 17.3% is allocated to building demolition, and 25% is allocated to social work and mental health fund. So that total budget for FY25, including some unspent funds that are reappropriated on the sales tax side, is 26 million, and on the use tax side is 8.1 million. I mentioned the capital budget and the fact that it was up to $81.1 million because it incorporates that $36 million amount that represents 1/2 of the prior year operating surplus. That includes also $7.7 million in street bridge projects, which have been increasing due to the fact that we are now, the state approved a graduated increase in the gas tax. And in the gas tax, which you pay at the pump, it's going up 2.5 cents every year for 5 years. And this is going to be the 4th year of that. And there's an allocation formula in the state constitution. The city benefits from that. So we've seen increases there. And so we have the ability to increase our allocations for street and bridge repair. And the other large portion of revenues to the half-cent or to the capital fund is the half-cent sales tax for capital improvements. A large portion of that, half of that goes to ward improvements, which is allocated by the respective aldermen. And then you have other portions allocated by 17% goes to major parks, 3% to recreation, 10% to the police department, and then 20% to citywide projects. Most of the citywide projects on the half-cent sales tax are mostly debt service. So there wasn't much discretionary room in that. And so we were fortunate to have, if you look at that box next to it, where people say, hey, you haven't spent all your money, where is that going? That helps offset, because it's a one-time benefit, so we put it to a one-time use, and you see a lot of good being done in the capital side for those projects. And illustrating some of those, at $35.9 million, $6.1 million for parks and fixing the pools and allocations to Soulard Market and things like that, which are have been neglected over the years, and so it's will benefit those facilities. The next slide is just a highlight of the change in personnel totals. Overall, the budget proposes a decline of 60 positions, 80 of those in the general fund, most of those related to the Justice Center budget that we talked about earlier. And a historic perspective of those position changes, down over 100, or down 800 positions over the last 10 years, 153 of those in the general fund. One of the, when we talk about employee pay and compensation, I always like to highlight the fact that part of the compensation package includes pension costs or pension benefits, and there are costs associated with that. And those are one of the things that, in addition to debt, cities often get in trouble with is the pensions, because that's one of those things where the cost today is estimated, and then it grows over time, and so these are costs that we have to be cognizant of, because it's a multi-generational thing. The decisions made today will affect going into the future. And as you can see, we've been creeping up in the last few years. Our budget for FY25 totals $106.1 million for all. We have 4 pension systems. We have an employee retirement system known as ERS. We have 2 fire retirement systems, which one is the fire retirement system that was frozen a number of years ago, and then there's the fire retirement plan, which is a new plan going forward for them. And then we have the police retirement system. The police retirement system, unfortunately, is controlled exclusively by state statute, so there's no particular things that we can do on the local side to adjust that in terms of when we discuss compensation for police. The next slide just shows the valuation percentages there. I should point out that historically we haven't been poorly funded. I mean, most funds, they say as long as you maintain 80% funding, you're pretty well off. The issue has been that it's been expensive. Now, I will point out that we have dropped below that 80% in recent years. You can see that the 73.5% for ERS, where actually there's a smoothing, and it's a number of years that you take, and you smooth it over 5 years. If we were using the market value to be 68.2%, and you can use that same calculation for each one of those. Have total unfunded liabilities of $633.3 million. But as I mentioned, these are costs that go out into the future, so just like debt, we need to keep an eye on those. And one of our positive stories of late has been our ability, since we've had surpluses in the last couple of years, our ability to restore or actually build up our reserves. And stories such as this earnings tax challenge that we've just been given in this last week highlight or underscore the importance of this. There's an organization called the Government Finances Officers Association, and they recommend that we retain a minimum of 2 months of expenditures, and that would be about 16.6% of the budget. We were never there, and just until FY23, and you can see in the graph, that's the first time we ever got to that point. And it's always something that the rating agencies look at. How are you positioning yourself? Can you sustain some serious loss of revenue? That's what they look at, and we had been knocked from that. So in the last few years where we had some surpluses, we actually, 1/2 of that amount would go to the fund balance, and 1/2 of that would go to the capital we just discussed. So that has been a positive in the last couple of years, so we hope to maintain that going forward. And this last slide is just a summary of everything there. The total budget, $1.3 billion, and there are some of the highlights. All of this, and again, all of this presentation, which you have either in a physical portion in front of you, or you need to reference, is on our city's budget division website. But that concludes pretty much what the presentation, and I'd be open to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Budget Director, Mr. Payne. What we'll do here, following what we did at our last public engagement hearing, we'll take a couple of questions from the public on the budget itself before we go into the public input session. So if you have questions specific to the budget for Mr. Payne, please just go ahead and raise your hand. And what we'll do is we will have a separate microphone so that Mr. Payne can stay at his and answer his. Do we have maybe another microphone we could use for that purpose? Excellent. Okay. Isaiah, would you mind helping out with the microphone for this portion of questions? We had just one question in the public. Good morning.
I have a question in regards to, did you hit the button? Is it on?
Oh, thank you.
And you're Tammy.
That's her. Okay. Okay.
1 second.
Hello, hello.
Underneath it doesn't want to work.
Ms. Buford, if you want to just ask your question, I'll repeat it for you while we get the mic situated.
There are several health and safety equipment, capital assets, and supplies listed under the police budget. Can you tell me what those are? Because they're asking for like $2 million for health and safety equipment. There's another $1 million for health and safety supplies. And then under health and safety capital assets, they're asking for $5 million. Can you tell me what that is?
Okay, I'll repeat the question. There are some line items in the police department budget pertaining to health and safety, 1 million, 2 million, and $500,000 in particular for those health and safety issues in the police department budget. And just for clarity, this is the proposed budget, just as a matter of, so there was a requested budget. Those requests are being proposed by the Board of V&A to the Board of Aldermen by way of those items in that line item detail to which you're referring. Okay. And so the question is if the budget director could kind of speak to what those health and safety line items represent.
Well, sure. I can tell you that just in general terms, The county system is consistent across the city government, that where you have health and safety and such. It would probably be, and again, I don't have the details in front of me, the police department would probably know more of that. But when you talk about health and safety, it would be things like equipment or that they wear to protect themselves. It could be everything from bulletproof vestments or shoes or anything that helps them with their ability to protect the individual from harm when they're out in the field. So wearing apparel, they've got about $1.5 million. Same thing with the health and safety. You'd have to look at the actual detail beyond this line item. But throughout this budget, you're going to see, for instance, not what did you say, the capital equipment, which item were you requesting?
There's health and safety supplies where they spent, $197,000, but then they're requesting $1 million for it now.
Okay, health and safety supplies. I see 823,000 budgeted there. Yeah,
And then there's health and safety equipment where they historically spending $41,366, now.
yeah, I can see the health and safety, well, they asked for it. But if you look at, what you're looking at is the budget request. That's the request column. The final column is the budget proposed. And you can see that the request might have been 2.1 million, but the actual recommended was 662,000. So it's a smaller amount. Same thing with the health and safety supplies. Again, as I mentioned, that's usually type things like, who knows, it could be anything from protective vestments and things like that. But they requested $1 million, and what's budgeted is 823,000. So
But then that's still significantly higher than what they have been historically spending. So I was asking, what does that consist of?
I might need to interject here. So I think what we can do, because it's so, your question is so specific and we don't want to get it wrong here. I'm looking at our financial analyst, Ryan Coleman, who's sitting in front of you. What we can do here is, maybe drill down to the specific line item details, because I think maybe the category is, a little less than descriptive as to what it specifically is funding. And we can kind of either, if we can't get the answer today, we can follow up, early this week to make sure that we have the details of what the request was, what the proposed funding is for, and maybe clarify that a little more for everyone.
Okay, yeah, because, yeah, also there's for apparel, there's ammunition, so
Mm.
those things are also listed in the budget. And then if he's saying that those health and safety things are also those, so why do we have so many duplicate requests for the exact same things?
Okay, no, that's a good question. We'll drill down into that and figure that out. Okay, any other questions about the budget in a general sense before we move into the public input portion of the hearing? Mr. Payne, thank you for being here on a Saturday morning, especially on a dreary day, if you will, and helping explain the budget in a general sense and all the work you do putting the budget together for us. Okay, with that, what we'll do is, Madam Clerk, would you mind keeping time? Do you have a mechanism to do that with, or? Okay, and what we'll do is we'll ask members of the public. I have the sign-in sheet. I'll do my best to call them up. Okay, and what we'll do is have you, once I call your name, come up to the microphone, and this will be the public input session of morning. Do you want to call? That would be great. Okay. If any members of the public who want to weigh in, who haven't signed up, speak. Now, is the time to get up and add your name to the list. Anybody who plans to testify, we do ask that members of the general public swear in. So rather than swearing you all in individually, I'll ask everybody who thinks they might want to weigh in this morning to raise their right hand or their left hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, thank you. When you approach the microphone, Madam Clerk will call members of the public to speak. We'll ask you to please identify yourself with your name. And if you could also provide us with some geographical information about where you live in the city, whether it's your neighborhood, your ward, or just generally speaking, we can have an understanding of where your perspective is really coming from. We would appreciate that. Okay, Madam Clerk, we can go ahead and get started. We're about to turn this hearing into a rave party.
Miss Tammy Buffer, was that what you were going to ask about when you signed up? Okay, so we have Miss Tammy Buffer. Miss Tammy Buffer.
And Tammy, if you have more questions that you want to outline for us, you don't necessarily have to use your 3 minutes outlining those. We'd be happy to take them offline. Okay. Either way, but if you want to outline them, please do. I just meant if you wanted to testify, you didn't need to use your 3 minutes to outline questions, but you're welcome to, absolutely, however you prefer to do it. Okay. I said you could still say a few words. Okay.
Um,
Good morning.
Good morning. Tammy Bufford. I'm a resident of the 3rd Ward. And I noticed that in the budget, we're still budgeting for those 197 vacant positions that the police have, and we continue to offer those. And then, but now they're also adding an additional 40 positions for police trainees, which is $1.7 million. And also, the sergeant positions, they're asking for an additional 20 positions for sergeants. And then also overtime, which was not listed before, but they're asking for another $14 million for overtime. So I'm trying to figure out, how is it that we keep adding to this police budget where they have all these funds already there and they're still adding more onto it and they're not spending it every year, which is taking away from the other departments who actually need the money in order to help keep us safe, to fix our roads. We could be using that to fund tenants funds, to help with our homeless population, to provide health and human services. Yet we're still adding more and spending more on police, and they're just holding this budget. They're not actually spending it. They're not even going to use it. They've also even increased their request for fleet equipment, where they just got a brand new fleet of SUVs that they're wrecking every day. And let's see. I think that's all I have to go over at the moment. But again, we're constantly spending money on a system, a failed system of arrest and incarcerate, and we're not invested into our community, into our people. These tax dollars are coming from the people, from the community, and we should be giving back to the community and helping our community out.
Thank you, Ms. Bufford. Next, we have Charles Holfen. Holfen?
It's Hayne. Doesn't look like Hayne to me either, don't worry about it.
He does.
That's quite all right. I noticed in the line item budgets here. we have
Good morning.
garden
If you don't, good morning.
Oh,
If you don't mind introducing yourself
I'm sorry.
and just some general geographical information.
My name is Hayne, Hoehn, first name Charles. Joanne and I spent about 42 years in the 4th Ward, renovating a house, and we now live in the ninth ward. So downsizing considerably. But in that 50-some years that I've been in the city, I've been just absolutely appalled that no one is addressing the loss of population in the city in any way, shape, or form. We have money in here, what, $11 million for ward improvements. But I don't see anything in CDA's budget or anybody else's budget. How are we going to address the bleeding of population out of the city? But we can't maintain this budget. We can't maintain our city with a continued loss of population. And there's nothing in there. I don't see any program anywhere that says, here's what we're going to do. Here's what LRA is going to do, or the LCRA is going to do to get properties back online. And developers aren't the answer. Developers get their money off the top, and they get my money, and they don't put anything back into the city. You need people coming in residential areas, in single-family residence, because we pay taxes. Developers don't pay for schools, they don't pay for police protection, they get blanket tax abatements. We need population back, and we need to find some way to reactivate the Community Development Agency to get them involved with the Land Clearance Authority, the Land Clearance Redevelopment Authority, and get these properties back online and get people back into the city. And that's not being addressed. And that is going to hurt us a long time, big time. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Hainwright. Next, we have Mr. Jay Cooley.
Good morning, Mr. Cooley.
Hey, good morning. Jerome Cool. I live in the 3500 block of Arsenal, and I'm also a city employee of the City of St. Louis Refuge Division for over 30 years. And what I was concerned about is the refuge budget. Why is it so low? And that's why people not coming back to the city, because we don't keep the trash up. Okay, we don't have enough people. Our pay is lower than anybody's else. Waste management, if y'all do the survey, which we've done that, we got to work 20 years to get their starting pay. After somebody working out the department for 2 or 3 weeks or a month, they're going to leave and go somewhere else. That's why we can't keep the trash up. Okay, and that's why people not coming back to the city, because trash is up and down the alley, north and south, especially in North St. Louis. Okay, the City of St. Louis Refuge Department, y'all need to do, drivers need more money. Okay, they got the worst job, which I said is refuge is #1, but we get paid less than every other department and every other trash department locally. We do the most work and the less pay, and we need to address that. Okay, when the drivers were sick, just so happened they were sick. Okay, they wasn't even well. They went back to work because the trash just piled up. Y'all don't have no other trash department. No one else can come and do what the refuge department does, and we need to get paid accordingly. And that's a big deal to us. Okay, to where we got our commissioner saying the refuge department okay with pay when it's not. They make top dollars in management, and we make the lowest dollar, and we go out and do all the work. Any other department, I've been there for years, it's better for me to just, I can really just go somewhere else, but I live in the city and I do love the city, okay? I raised my family here, and it's a good city, but y'all just need to be fair with us, okay? When the city did not have the money, when y'all did not have the money, we accepted the pay. Now that y'all got the money, it ain't fair to us to say, we're gonna put it in the bank for interest, and we need our money, we need the money now to eat with. And we maintained the city as long as we could with that small pay. But these other divisions, waste management, they offering more money. And that's why our guys is leaving to go to these other departments. Okay, if y'all don't keep the trash up, people not gonna come back to this city. Why would they come back? Okay, the front of the house looks good, but the back of the alley, your alley full of trash. Because y'all don't, it's common. Pay the trash people. Y'all gotta get the trash up. Why would you come back here? Y'all asking people to come back to the city. Where they gonna put their trash? It's just common. Just give us the more money. Then you're gonna attract more people. The people that's there will stay. All right, if y'all have anything you want to ask me, I've been there for years. I've been doing this job forever. We just need more money. And that's just to be fair with us, since the city does have it. Right. We don't want to work 7 days a week. We do it because the trash needs to be picked up. But if y'all would hire more drivers, we won't have to work 7 days a week like the commissioner saying we have, not the director saying work 7 days a week. It's not fair to us. But we know the trash gotta be picked up. We doing it because the citizens do need the trash picked up. And I pay a trash bill to get my trash picked up. But y'all don't pay the workers to pick it up. And it's been going on through several administrations.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. Thank you for your service to our city.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. Next, we have Mr. Terrell Howell. Okay. That is that's all we have right now.
Is that all we had? Did any other members of the, did any other members of the public want to weigh in on the city's budget this morning? If there's anybody here who wanted to weigh in and didn't want to speak, please feel free to stay after, get our contact information and email us, or feel free to write down your thoughts in any other way. Okay? And with that, again, I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. We've really appreciate members of the public who are willing to spend their Saturday, their time off, sharing your thoughts with us. As I've mentioned several times now, this is your city's budget. This is your budget. These are your tax dollars. So your input really is vital to making the best decisions for how we spend your funds. Thank you to the International Institute for hosting us today. Thank you to STL TV. And thank you to the members of the board who came before us. Did any members of the committee want to weigh in this morning? I'm the only one with a microphone, but I'd be happy to share it. Did any members of the public want to weigh in this morning? Madam Vice Chair, Alderwoman Boyd.
I just want to thank everyone for taking their Saturday and giving us some time to kind of give us your input. And I want people to understand, we take it very seriously, your questions and your comments. And so we are aware of a lot of issues that you are bringing to our attention. And so as the Budget Committee, we do know that we cannot add to the budget, but we can take away. So we are working to try to work with the administration to see how we can make this a budget that can help the city as a whole. So I think people don't understand what Paul Payne had been saying for years, that we have to bring our revenue in. And that's what keeps your city going. Right now, we have the offer dollars and all these other dollars that are coming in, but they won't be here forever. So we have to, it's like at your house, you win the lottery, but you got to act like you don't have that money because you got to keep your house running. Because when that money runs out, you still have to keep moving forward. So that's where we are in regards to the budget, trying to make good decisions to make sure we use your tax dollars wisely. So thank you all for coming out. We appreciate you giving us your time on a Saturday, and we take very seriously the questions and comments that you give to us in regards to our city budget.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Madam Chair, specifically for getting these budget hearings in the community. I just want to thank you all, members of the public, for being here. I know that sometimes testifying can be scary, so I appreciate you all coming here and sharing your thoughts in this setting. And I just want to echo my colleagues in saying that we do take this seriously. I think we are looking at making recommendations based on the feedback that we've heard from the public and what we've heard from the departments. As Alderwoman Boyd pointed out, we do have limited capacity in what, as we as a council, as a board, can do. But your testimony and your feedback is very important in this process.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Same, want to thank everyone who came out to testify, especially the city worker. I think that there has been a lot of conversations about the refuge department, and for me, I'm glad that as a city we're having those conversations and that some things are into the spotlight. And I just wanted to thank you for coming to testify, because a lot of times I think workers, sometimes it can be uncomfortable for workers to be able to vocally speak up and say, here's what I like. But I know for myself and probably for many of my colleagues, we want to hear from you so that we can understand what we should be advocating for. Because you're absolutely right. Trash and consistent quality services that our constituents need to keep our neighborhoods up to par is such a huge part of what we're here for and what we hope that the budget will lead to and reflect. So I actually wanted to thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Okay, and just a thank you to all of our staff, our City Board of Aldermen staff for making these public hearings possible, especially on a Saturday, Mr. Clerk, Madam Clerk, and all the members of the STLTV, Isaiah in the back for, and Ryan Coleman for being here this morning to hear our city's budget. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn. Excellent. If that would conclude our Budget and Public Employees Committee hearing this morning. Thank you. Have a good rest of your weekend.